Kowtowing to China and the daily Biden dumpster fire. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials, and the millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer. This podcast, ladies and gentlemen, is called Kowtowing to China. Anyone know where the word kowtowing came from? China! It's defined as kneel and touch the ground with the forehead in worship or submission as part of the Chinese custom. So we're going to call this Kowtowing to China in large part because first up is Bill Maher, whom we love because he makes fun of the right and he makes fun of the left. And here's Bill Maher with a number of really funny clips talking about how we are kowtowing to China. First up, Maher talks about Eileen Gu. You know, she's the freestyle skier in the Olympics who ended up betraying her country, which is the United States of America, and said, I'm going to be a Chinese citizen instead, and I'm going to compete for China in the Olympics. Well, Maher just went after a whole bunch of celebs in this piece. We have a number of different clips. First up, he talks about Eileen Gu, the freestyle skier, but also China's tennis star Peng Shuai, who ended up going missing because she said that a party official had raped her. We have this first clip from Bill Maher. Here it is.
And finally, new rule. Someone has to tell China, you can steal our trade secrets, our software, and our intellectual property, but we draw the line at our hot freestyle skiers. Now, if you've been like me over the past few weeks, glued to your TV watching the Olympics, that makes exactly two of us. We knew there were shithole countries, but who knew there was a shithole superpower? But I'm sure you've heard about American citizen Eileen Gu, the beautiful model, influencer, and now gold medal winning skier who was born and raised here in America, but who chose to ski in the Olympics for China. Cool, huh? Is it? Is that cool now? To choose to represent a totalitarian police state over America? The Olympics pretends to only be about sports, but of course the games have always been a bit of a proxy war for which country has the best system. And by choosing Team China, Eileen Gu became a living symbol of China's triumph over the West, which wouldn't bother me so much if I thought China had triumphed over us in the ways that really matter, but they haven't.
So, no, they haven't. And Eileen Gu, ladies and gentlemen, she is a gold medalist, if you will, from the Olympics, decided to ski for China. I'm pretty sure the Chinese Communist Party recruited her well in advance of the Olympics when she decided to flip her allegiance. And then, of course, CNN, naturally, puts in the CNN style section why Eileen Gu is luxury fashion's dream model. And they just go on and just pour all of this nonsense over what a wonderful person that she is because she won the gold medal in freestyle skiing. And they say the 18-year-old's gold medal performance in the big air competition thrust her into the global spotlight, sparking such a furor in China that social media platform Weibo crashed under the weight of interest. But Gu has spent years establishing herself as both a top athlete and a hugely bankable model who appeals to brands in both Asia and the West. Well, of course, we know what happened there. They gave Eileen Gu a whole bunch of money in order to get her to model in China, but also, more importantly, to get her to compete for China. Not a surprise. So Maher is torching these celebrities. And this entire series we have here in Mark the Millennials is a series of clips from Maher, just torching one celebrity after another. So next up, he talks about how Britain returned Hong Kong in 1997, and the Chinese mainland, CCP, said, well, we're going to leave Hong Kong alone, and they're going to just kind of like govern the way they are, kind of maybe a territory with lots of freedom and special freedoms that people don't get on the mainland. Of course, that didn't happen. And then he segues, Bill Maher segues, that is, on the NBA, which of course they are the biggest tools there are in the United States right now when it comes to kowtowing to China. We have that clip, and here it is.
Now, we do have human rights issues right here at home. We do. But we're still, at least for another 3 years, a democracy based on freedom. And they are an authoritarian surveillance state based on how'd you like to disappear for a few months? Like that tennis player who recently vanished for a while when she said she'd been raped by a government official. We do still throw too many black people in jail. But perspective matters. China has basically jailed an entire ethnic minority, the Uyghurs, a situation that both the Trump and Biden administrations has called a genocide. America is not close to that. And it's a cynical dodge to pretend that China's sins should be overlooked because we all do it.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's the same old wokeness, right? That the idea that you can't basically say that the people in China are folks that are in any way, shape, or form subjugating people, because then that would be racist. And Maher actually talks about this at the end of this clip. I think it's the last clip where he defines what woke is and how the left is really messing this up. So here's another clip from Maher, once again, hitting one celebrity after another. Here's a clip.
John Cena took that deal. Well, come on, China accounts for 34% of global box office, and he's a movie star now. So, like the Uyghurs, last year he learned he needed to get some re-education. You see, John, referred to Taiwan as a country as if it was a separate country from China, which it is. But China would like to do to Taiwan what it did to Tibet and what it's now doing to Hong Kong. So we were treated to this video.
我必须说，现在就是很重要。我爱更尊重中国，更中国人。我很抱歉对我的错误。
And I thought steroids shrunk your balls.
So John Cena, of course, is a professional actor and a wrestler, right? And that's, of course, Maher making fun of him because Cena, of course, looks like he's on steroids big time. Obviously, he lifts all the time. He's this massive dude. And he made the mistake of criticizing China as far as he is concerned, because much of his money and the box office receipts come from China. And so that was John Cena speaking, of course, in Chinese. I'm not sure if it was Mandarin or one of the other languages. I'm assuming it was Mandarin. And because I don't speak, of course, the languages in China, naturally, I don't know anyone that really does. Nonetheless, that was him. And he was apologizing. It was almost like he was put in a re-education camp and hit over the head and said, yeah, you must apologize to the CCP. And that's the only way we're going to continue to show your movies in China. It's the only way you're going to make all this money. That's almost hard to believe, how the celebs are kowtowing to China. And I just want to say this. Good for you, Bill Maher, for going after them. So here's Bill Maher again talking about Eileen Gu and others in the NBA. We have a few clips on that, and here it is.
So can you really blame 18-year-old Eileen Gu, who's already made over $31 million as the face of 23 brand products in China, for following in the footsteps of other American celebrities? Some of Gu's defenders say it's racist to ask if she's still an American citizen, and she herself won't say. Why is that racist?
Exactly. Why is it racist to say, hey, Eileen Gu, you just went in the Olympics and competed for China, even though you're an American citizen? Are you still an American citizen? And by the way, you're earning $31 million a year while living in China. And you made this $31 million literally overnight as a result of being a model and a celeb because you're, somebody who's a freestyle skier. Are you showing your fealty to China, or are you still an American citizen? Perfectly reasonable thing to ask. And it's not a racist thing to ask. But of course, the woke crowd is now saying, well, yeah, you can't ask that question. Of course, MSNBC and CNN and ABC, CBS. But nonetheless, he continues. Maher continues, and now he's hitting on the NBA. And first up, here it is.
In 2020, NBA players wore jerseys that said freedom, speak up, and justice. But I guess those things only matter for home games. Sorry, Uyghurs. Someone has to tell me where we got this rule that you can't criticize China, because I suspect we got it from China. Because after all, it's where we get everything else.
And that's technically where he ended that kind of soliloquy over China. But we still have another clip because he defines what woke is. But in that particular clip, of course, Maher is talking about the NBA and Enes Kanter Freedom, and he's showing up pictures, if you're watching us on YouTube or Rumble, where Enes Kanter Freedom, who plays for the Boston Celtics, would normally wear and regularly wear jerseys that talked about freedom and free the Uyghurs and this kind of thing. And he got in a lot of trouble from the NBA because the NBA was getting in a lot of trouble with China, where one of their biggest markets, if not very soon the biggest market, will be for the NBA. And naturally, since the NBA is all about money, they can't even have a conversation about anything that has to do with freedom and totalitarianism, because naturally, if you're in the NBA, you kneel when they play the United States national anthem. But when it comes to criticizing China, what do? Oh, no, you must be like, what is it? John Cena. That's right. You must be like John Cena, the wrestler who went and spoke in Mandarin and apologized to the Chinese people about the fact that he was criticizing their system of government and how there were people in concentration camps. Well, here is Bill Maher talking about the definition of woke. And it's pretty interesting because, remember, this is a comedian from the left who's kind of just had it. And as a critical thinker, is just using comedy and criticizing everybody, which is what comedy is supposed to do. Here's that clip.
The definition of woke was supposed to be being alert to injustice in society. But because the woke now see race first and everything else never, fear of being accused of racism has given a free pass on human rights abuses to China and any other places that are perceived as non-white. If China was in Europe, would they get away with having concentration camps without more of an outcry from America?
No, of course not. Because it's okay to go after people who are white and doing really bad things, especially in Western Europe. But it's not okay to do the same thing with China because naturally, since these folks are Asian, they are somehow an oppressed people. Well, in fact, in China, the people who are oppressed are indeed the Uyghurs and many others who are Asian, but they're being oppressed by the CCP. And so you got Maher saying, look, the definition of woke used to mean that you would be supporting those people. But now, of course, you have to identify with them, because when you identify with them, you're talking about race rather than reality. Pretty cool stuff. I got to tell you something, podcast listeners. When it comes to comedy, there are very few comedians left in the United States who are willing to speak this way. And I know it probably drives you crazy that I like Bill Maher, because Bill Maher makes tons of fun of Republicans. I mean, he absolutely hates Donald Trump. He skewers Donald Trump. He can't stand much of the Republican Party's values. But nonetheless, I listen to this guy because he makes equal fun of and uses satire to do so, makes fun of the Democrats and how crazy they have become. And we're going to talk a little bit about this more in this podcast. But next up, we have public executions in the Ukraine. Yeah. So apparently the Olympics went on as they were intended to because China asked Russia to delay the Ukraine invasion until after the Olympics. Now, this intel from various Western governments has now been confirmed. So why did we send our people there then if we knew this was going to happen? Why did we send our people to China if we knew China was colluding with Putin and knowing that he was going to really and truly invade the Ukraine. Well, it seems kind of obvious at this point that's what happened. And to show you how bad this is getting, in the Daily Caller, Russia drafts plans for public executions in captured cities. In the Daily Caller, Russia devised plans to stage public executions in cities its forces conquer as a way to cut down the morale of the Ukrainians, a European intelligence official told Bloomberg. In addition to the executions, the plan includes crackdowns on protests and detention of opponents, the official told the outlet. Fox News also cited a European official in reporting the alleged development. Civilians have thus far put up a tough fight against the Russian forces, arming themselves with weapons and Molotov cocktails. Ukraine's state emergency service said on Wednesday that over 2,000 Ukrainian civilians have perished since the invasion by Russia began. Quote, more than 2,000 Ukrainians died, not counting our defenders, the service said in a statement, CNN reported. Children, women, and our defense forces are losing their lives every hour. Russian troops captured their first major city, Kherson, in southern Ukraine on Wednesday. The port's city's mayor announced the city hall had been seized by Russian forces, who reportedly set a curfew of 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Approximately 1 million Ukrainians have fled their country amid Russia's full-scale invasion, equivalent to 2% of Ukraine's entire population. The United Nations announced Wednesday. Imagine, podcast listeners, what that's going to do to Eastern and Western Europe. It's going to wreak havoc, just like the Russians wreaked havoc in Syria, but also Europe, because so many Syrians left the civil war and did what? They went to Europe. And, now you have Western governments having to deal with this massive humanitarian crisis. Same thing is happening now. Same thing's happening now. But of course, it's Russia and the Ukraine rather than Russia and their satellite client state of Syria. In just 7 days, we have witnessed the exodus of 1 million refugees from Ukraine to our neighboring countries, UN High Commissioner for Refugees Filippo Grandi tweeted. So, it's just going to get worse, right? Because the Russian government, and I dare say, hopefully not the Russian people, because this I don't know for sure, but certainly the Russian government and the Russian military is wreaking this havoc and creating an enormous humanitarian crisis for everybody involved. And if you already have 1 million people that have fled, imagine how many more millions will flee when the Russians finally take over the country if they don't just level it first. And then you have to say to yourself, what would be the point of leveling the country? But it sure seems like that's kind of what they're doing. Jailed Russian opposition figure Alexei Navalny called on fellow Russians to protest the war daily, calling President Vladimir Putin an obviously insane czar. it seems pretty clear that Putin is just like the czars. I would have to agree. And hopefully, the people in Russia, as well as America's allies, will stop this crazy stuff from happening. And what's interesting, podcast listeners, is when you scroll down the Daily Caller to the comments, it's kind of fascinating when you see some of these comments. It says, here's Richard Guzzi, I doubt it's his real name, but he says, seems like propaganda and fake news. Facts are, we messed around in and around Ukraine for the benefit of our own oligarchs for dollars. And on top of that, we have been told for a decade by Russia that they don't want NATO expansion next door. And our oligarchs simply ignored that to the point that Russia invaded. Interesting. And now the corrupt media is actively involved in propaganda and making things up, just as they did before with Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and Serbia military action and invasion. Richard Jung said, public executions only strengthen the opposition. Hitler tried it in World War II, and the resistance only got stronger. Many officers were tried for war crimes due to this policy. Yeah, but not until millions and millions and millions of people died. Melody Poor, Daily Caller is one of the last places that I'd expect to find fake news. Really kind of interesting. Because there are also reports, podcast listeners, and there are actually pictures of, and this is in multiple media sources, by the way, that the Russians have sent in mobile crematoriums. So these are mobile, disgusting tubes on the back of like a big truck. And I guess the truck must be, powered. Maybe the crematorium is powered by natural gas. Maybe, I'm not sure. Who knows? It's gross though. And the theory there is that the Russians, if they start slaughtering people, which of course they already are, and they want to make sure the media doesn't take pictures of any of this, or the Ukrainians don't take pictures of any of this, the Russians will just scoop up the bodies and incinerate them. Same thing maybe with their soldiers, because they don't, the Russians don't really care about their own human life. Certainly not Vladimir Putin. He doesn't care. And as Russian soldiers are killed themselves, will they also incinerate their bodies as well? I mean, it's just disgusting when you think about the fact that such a person could ever be allowed to run a country, okay? To run a country. But this has been made possible. His leadership has been made possible because of the oligarchs, of course, inside of Russia. These are the uber rich oil barons, natural gas barons, the uber rich folks that own the factories in Russia. And these are the folks that prop up, of course, Putin. Why do they prop him up? Because that way there are no checks and balances to their power and to the amount of money that they can make. And it demonstrates to the American people, hopefully, what is to come in the United States if we don't make sure that we keep our Democrat Republic. I mean, these are reminders, right? These are reminders that the rest of the world isn't like us. And thank God that we are not like the rest of the world. Thank God. Except, if you were to talk to someone on the left, they would look at Putin and Russia and of course make some sort of crazy connection between the two. Oh, we're just like them. We're becoming them. And naturally, they don't really respect our institutions. And maybe if we just sent them over there for a little while, they would figure it out, right? It's like, hey, I have an idea. One-way ticket to Russia, one-way ticket to China. Hang out there for a couple of years in each country, 2 years in China, 2 years in Russia. I don't know. Maybe you would become a conscript in the Russian army and see how much fun that would be to fight in the middle of the winter. Probably not a lot of fun. And you can also see what your standard of living would be like. And you would also get to see, like, from the left, if you start criticizing the government because you see things that you feel are unjust while you're there in China and while you're there in Russia, what do you think is going to happen to you? You're going to disappear. I mean, you're going to disappear exactly like Chinese tennis star Peng Shuai when she made a statement and put it on social media that a CCP official had raped her. And then what happened? Did the CCP official, did he have to go to trial? Was he arrested? Did anything happen to him? Oh, no. It happened to her. She literally disappeared. And I'm sure they sent her to what? A re-education camp, because that's what they do. So next up, podcast listeners, you can't fix stupid. This is John Kennedy. Senator John Kennedy spoke at Cpac. I suspect that most people missed this speech. Look, John Kennedy, while he is a United States Senator from Louisiana, he is really, in my opinion, like a stand-up comic. I mean, he just is. He's a stand-up comic that uses comedy to make fun of the left. He uses comedy to engage supporters so that they want to get involved in Republican politics or they want to get involved in the conservative movement. And he uses comedy to expose how the left is just so broken. And so we have a series of clips from John Kennedy's speech at Cpac. You're going to love this. First up, here it is.
I believe that America was founded by geniuses. But it's being run by idiots. I believe that you can't fix stupid. but you can vote it out. I believe that America, unless we lose it, is the greatest country in all of human history, and the whole world knows it.
So, I mean, that's John Kennedy, right? It's just pure stand-up comedy at what's supposed to be a conservative movement mecca, Cpac, which is held every year. And there's John Kennedy, Mr. Stand-up United States Senator comedian. You can't fix stupid, but you can vote it out. So we have another clip from him, and here it is. Enjoy.
When's the last time you heard of someone trying to sneak into China? America is so great. America is so great that people who hate it refuse to leave it.
You know what? This is what I've been saying for years, right? And I know I hear other people say this too, and it does sound sometimes like a weak argument, but John Kennedy turns it into a joke. And namely, that argument is, oh yeah, well, you don't like it, you should just leave this country. You know, it's not necessarily the best argument in the world, but it is an argument nonetheless. But John Kennedy turns that argument over on its head and says, you ever notice people aren't like climbing a wall, or they're not really crossing the border and risking their lives to get into China? They're not doing that to get into Cuba or to Russia or to Venezuela or to North Korea. You ever notice that? Isn't that kind of interesting? It just doesn't happen. But you know where they do that? You know where people do risk their lives to get into? Oh, it's the United States. In fact, they will traverse thousands of miles in very hostile areas and risk their lives just to get here. But they don't do the same thing in other countries. And so he's very good at wordsmithing, Kennedy is, and not to mention comedy. We have two more clips from him. You're going to love them. Here's the next one.
He's also mismanaged inflation. Now, I don't like to brag about the expensive places I've been, but this morning I went to the gas station.
Podcast listeners, you've got to use that. I don't want to brag about the expensive places I've been. And see, when you listen to that, you look at him on this video and you think to yourself, oh no, where is he going? Is he becoming really arrogant? Because that's what it feels like. But I just went to the gas station. It's just perfect. It's perfect. And you hear that every day. No kidding. Today, my wife texted me and she said, you won't believe this. Gasoline is hovering at $4 a gallon. She said, just like a few days ago, it was 50 cents less per gallon. I mean, this is today. And gasoline is something that is a true pet peeve with my wife and with all of us, of course. But I think particularly I've noticed with her, like I'll go to the pump and I'll just shake my head and almost close my eyes. I don't even want to look at the total amount that it costs to fill up my tank. And so I just get mad at it and I try to ignore it to the extent that I can. She just gets, just really makes her mad as she sees that pump dollar amount go and turn and turn and turn and turn. And so she sent me this text and it's like, this is very timely. This is very timely. I don't want to brag. I like to go to expensive places. This morning, I just stopped at a gas station. Here's the final clip in this series from Senator John Kennedy speaking at Cpac. Here it is.
What else do I believe? I believe that exercise makes you look better naked. So does alcohol.
So, I told you, podcast listeners, this guy is a stand-up comedian. It took me like 2 minutes to get that joke too. I believe that exercise makes you look better naked. So does alcohol. And I'm like, what? I don't get. Oh, right. Yes. Okay. I get that. And of course, Kennedy wove in to his speech a lot of serious points as well, which we're not playing, in large part because it's really kind of refreshing to listen to someone at such a high level of elected government, such as a United States Senator, who's able to joke and laugh at himself, but also use humor to laugh at the opposition. And I think that's fantastic. What better way is there to use humor to make the opposition even more furious? Because they need to be furious, the opposition. They need to be made fun of. They need to be exposed through humor. And no one can do this better than John Kennedy. And he did that so well at Cpac because of the fact they gave him a solid, 15 minutes to 20 minutes to speak. So, John Kennedy speaks slowly. He can't get out a lot of information, but he can certainly get out a lot of jokes. And that's, you can't fix stupid, but you can vote it out. So next up, podcast listeners, the Daily Biden Dumpster Fire. And it's a doozy. We thought we heard everything from Joe Biden about the Daily Biden Dumpster Fire. And all I can say is, with this Daily Biden Dumpster Fire, it's no wonder that Russia invaded, okay? It's no wonder. It's no wonder that Russia invaded Ukraine. Because during the State of the Union address, we found yet another incredible fumble by Joe Biden. Folks, if you were Vladimir Putin and you were watching this State of the Union address, what would you think? You're like, gosh, I'm glad I invaded the Ukraine. I might as well just go on to the next country because this guy's an idiot. Listen to this president of the United States who's reading from a teleprompter, mind you, and still can't get it right. We have that clip, and here it is.
Because you can't build a wall high enough to keep out a vaccine. The vaccine can stop the spread of these diseases.
That was in front of the entire United States Congress and the Supreme Court and the cabinet and the American people and the world. And that's your president of the United States in an amazing dumpster fire. And you got, of course, Vladimir Putin and his people who are watching. You have President Xi of China and his people who are watching. And they're probably laughing so hard. This guy is a comedian, but what he doesn't realize is he's not trying to be funny. He just is funny to watch because he is a disaster. And it's obvious that someone's pulling the strings. He's not leading this country. It's clearly the foreign, who do you think's running the country, Chris? Who? Is it Obama that's running the country? Is it the intelligence agencies that are running the country? Certainly they're running the war, and Biden, it's saying yes to everything. But you watch this and you're like, there's no way in God's green earth that this man is in charge of the United States of America, the largest, most powerful country with the largest, most powerful economy, the largest and most powerful military. There's no way he's in charge. There's no way that he's calling the shots. I want you to listen to this again. This happened during the State of the Union address, and he's talking about walls, and he's reading from a teleprompter and still can't do it. We have that clip, and here it is again.
Because you can't build a wall high enough to keep out a vaccine. The vaccine can stop the spread of these diseases.
You can't build a wall high enough because the vaccine will stop the spread of these diseases. Folks, it's no wonder our country is going in the wrong direction. And I just hope people watch this. But here's what's interesting. When you watch the media, have you seen any of these incredibly stupid dumpster fires by Joe Biden? Have you seen any of them? Maybe if you watched Fox, you would see one, right? Maybe you'd see two. Do you ever see them on ABC? Do you ever see them on NBC? Do you ever see them on CBS or MSNBC or CNN? You do not. Of course you don't. You don't see them because these networks don't want you to think that there's something wrong with this administration, namely that the president is obviously going downhill very quickly with early stages of Alzheimer's, and the fact that, this is the normal progression of aging. Unfortunately, some people sooner, some people much later. But Biden, he's pushing 80, so it's no wonder this is happening. And that's the Daily Biden Dumpster Fire. Next up, podcast listeners, we have Biden says, refund the police. So you're going to love this. The Democrats are polling. They realize they're in trouble. They're in trouble on a lot of issues. one of those issues that's key is the defund the police movement. And so now Biden, after having polled, realizes that he has to refund the police. So he's saying to cities across America, hey, look, you're all run by Democrats. It's time to spend more on the police. And so this is in Bloomberg. President Joe Biden implored local governments to fund police departments. During his State of the Union address on Tuesday, major cities, though, had already gotten the message. Quote, the answer is not to defund the police, said Biden. It's to fund the police, Biden said, sparking raucous applause that brought both House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy to their feet. Quote, fund them with resources and training. They need to protect their communities, end quote. Can you believe Nancy Pelosi stood up during that? I mean, here's someone, Nancy Pelosi, who led the defund the police BLM movement for the Democrats, among many others, of course, but certainly she's the one with the most power. And now suddenly she's like, oh, well, the polling's gone the other way. And we're going to lose badly. So we're going to refund the police. I hope everybody sees what a bunch of tools these people are, because they're willing to lie about anything and everything. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And so here's the article continuing. Bloomberg Equality plus City Lab. Bloomberg's got so many of these papers. It says, in fact, major cities have been allocating more dollars to their police forces, even before some of them faced a pandemic-era increase in violence. The 5 biggest cities in the U.S. expect to spend nearly $11 billion on policing this year, up from $10 billion they allocated before the pandemic in aggregate. Their spending on the police has increased every fiscal year since 2012. Guess what this article doesn't tell you? It doesn't tell you about the fact that these same major cities that are blue and run by blue mayors, you know what they're not doing? They're not prosecuting the criminals. So you can refund the police. You can hire more policemen and women. You can pay them more, and you can provide them with better equipment and more resources. But when they arrest someone, or if they're not allowed to arrest someone, or the person they did arrest gets right out that same day after committing a heinous crime, what difference does it make how much money you give them? But of course, Bloomberg has to lie about this and carry the water for the Biden administration, and of course for Nancy Pelosi. This is how bad, ladies and gentlemen, these people have become. I mean, they have no shame whatsoever about what they will lie about in order to be able to retain power. And I just hope the people remember. I'm pretty sure that they will, because if you live in those blue cities, you notice that crime isn't going down. I mean, you can hear these promises, we're hiring more people, but if you see the same guy that just robbed your store is walking by your store again and looking at it with, wanting eyes, you probably know things aren't going to get any better. So for all those reasons, please remember to vote accordingly. And don't forget, this refund the police movement is a big phony movement. And that is, Biden says, refund the police. And that's it for Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Getter, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.